Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. Let's dig in. Here's what's been going on in Russia in the last 24 hours. President Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing over May 19-20th continues to underscore just how central China has become to Moscow's strategic positioning. Coming days after President Trump's visit, this trip wasn't ceremonial. Putin pressed for progress on economic ties and energy projects, notably the long-discussed Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, capable of moving 50 billion cubic meters of Russian gas annually through Mongolia to northern China. While last week's talks indicated general agreement on the route, today's updates suggest that pricing and construction timelines remain unsettled. Analysts note that China retains leverage, having already purchased large volumes of discounted Russian oil and gas, and that Putin's agenda in Beijing highlights Moscow's growing reliance on Beijing's goodwill to sustain its war effort in Ukraine. The summit also reinforced the ideological and diplomatic messaging between the two countries. Xi Jinping reiterated the call for a cessation of hostilities in the Middle East and framed China-Russia relations as a model for multipolar cooperation. Both leaders condemned U.S. nuclear policy and Trump's missile defense plans, portraying Washington as destabilizing global stability. Their joint statement promoted long-term strategic coordination, signaling that their partnership extends across diplomacy, economics, and military planning. This framing reinforces the narrative that Moscow and Beijing are working to shape the international order on their terms, while still keeping energy and technology negotiations quiet and ongoing. On the military intelligence front, there are nuanced updates from previously reported developments. European intelligence agencies confirm that Russian personnel who received PLA training in 2025, covering drone warfare, counter-drone measures, and electronic warfare, have been deployed in Crimea and Zaporizhzhia. Today's reporting adds that these trainees include officers capable of transmitting lessons down the Russian chain of command, making the PLA training an operational multiplier rather than a purely academic exercise. Additionally, Russia's strategic nuclear drills, conducted May 1921 with over 64,000 personnel and assets across land, air, and sea, remain underway. Today, the update emphasizes that these exercises included tactical nuclear rehearsals in Belarus, highlighting Moscow's continued nuclear signaling against NATO, while its battlefield performance in Ukraine shows constraints. NATO and Baltic developments have also evolved subtly. Yesterday's reports of Ukrainian drones being diverted into Estonian airspace are confirmed again today, but additional detail suggests the intercepts were managed by Romanian F-16s under NATO Baltic air policing. Estonia's defense ministry reported that the UAV had been monitored and downed with minimal risk to civilians, underscoring NATO's readiness. Latvia lifted a temporary air alert after verifying no incursion occurred. While Russia continues to allege that Ukraine is using Baltic territory to stage attacks, today's coverage emphasizes that both Latvia and Estonia continue to reject these claims as disinformation. And NATO and the U.S. reiterate collective defense commitments. Ukraine's strikes on Russian energy infrastructure continue to have measurable economic effects. Updated reporting notes the Lukoil refinery in Kstovo and Yaroslavl 3 pumping station were struck, with fires visible on May 19th. These strikes, combined with other attacks on Solnechnogorsk and Ryazan, are contributing to a sustained financial squeeze on Russia, particularly as some banks struggle with liquidity and the federal budget deficit grows. While the strikes are a continuation of earlier operations, today's updates indicate the operational reach and accuracy of Ukraine's mid- and long-range drones is improving, pressuring Russian logistics and complicating energy operations along multiple axes. On the sanctions and economic front, the UK has officially implemented its waiver for diesel and jet fuel refined from Russian crude abroad, effective May 20th, while the US continues a similar policy. This update clarifies that these measures are intended to stabilize domestic fuel supply amid Middle East disruptions. But critics note it still benefits Russian revenues, allowing the Kremlin a degree of economic breathing room. Observers see this as a delicate balance between maintaining pressure on Moscow and preventing domestic energy shortages in Western countries. Internal Russian developments remain noteworthy. Today's coverage highlights personnel reshuffles in the State Duma, including reports that Colonel General Alexander Lapin may replace Andrei Kartopolov as chair of the Duma Defense Committee. The human rights ombudswoman Yana Lantratova was endorsed despite continued controversy over links to Ukrainian child transfers from occupied territories. Environmental and social pressures continue, with Ukrainian strikes on Black Sea oil infrastructure near Tuapse generating pollution and public concern. Cossack groups remain divided, with some aligning with Kyiv, highlighting fissures in Moscow-aligned civil-military organizations. Central Asia is also showing evolving alignments. Turkish engagement with Kazakhstan and other Turkic states continues to strengthen trade corridors and strategic partnerships. Moscow remains alarmed, but these moves suggest that regional powers are recalibrating in ways that could gradually erode Russian influence. Today's coverage emphasizes that the rhetoric about the century of the Turkic world is not just symbolic. It reflects deeper, durable changes in Central Asian political and economic orientation. Finally, Kyiv continues to work its diplomatic channels. The EU signed a memorandum of understanding for macrofinancial assistance, which could unlock 3.2 billion euros in mid-June, with military spending prioritized. Hungary and Ukraine have begun expert-level consultations focusing on minority rights and EU accession, suggesting a strategic reset in bilateral ties. These developments, while slower moving, indicate Kyiv is reinforcing its European support base even as battlefield operations continue. So to sum up today's brief, Moscow leans heavily on Beijing for political, economic, and military support. Ukraine's mid- and long-range strikes are putting tangible pressure on Russian logistics and energy. NATO maintains vigilance against misdirected UAVs and Russian disinformation, while Europe and the US balance sanctions enforcement with energy security. Internal Russian pressures, from personnel reshuffles to environmental fallout, underscore a Kremlin stretched across multiple challenges. And in Central Asia, Turkey's growing influence suggests the post-Soviet space is gradually shifting in ways that may limit Russian sway in the long term. Thanks for listening and for being part of this community. If you want to support the show, leaving a review or a thoughtful comment helps others discover it. We also share a daily written intel brief on Substack, restrictedhandling.substack.com, where we go deeper on Russia and China, along with broader coverage of Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Wishing you a great day ahead.